Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to second day of our faculty development program organized by GST and Indirect Taxes Committee of ICA New Delhi, ICAI Ernakulam, and MG University, Management and Business Studies, MG University, Kottayam. So today we have subject levy and collection of tax, reverse charge mechanism in GST, and composition levy. We have none other than our Shankaranarayan sir. Yesterday he was here as the faculty for the first day. And to welcome our speaker and all the dignitaries and participants, I request our chairman, C.A. Ranjit R. Warrier, to do the honor.
Very good afternoon to most respected dignitaries and participants. Indeed, the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India is very proud, and in fact we consider as a blessed event, if I can say, that we are doing this joining hands with MG University, that we consider the real partners to nation building, or the fraternity who's truly been instrumental in turning the younger generation into younger resources. The most respected faculty members of various colleges under Mahatma Gandhi University, that we are here with the second year of this faculty development program. Last year, as I'm sure all of you all remember, it was accounting standards, and this year under the able guidance of Sajiman sir and Sulaiman sir, we were suggested through Roy sir that we will this time go for a GST pattern that our teachers, most respected teachers, would like to have more enlightenment on. And that is how we are here today. It is my personal loss that I could not be part of the inaugural ceremony yesterday and hear the good words, the great words of most respected Vice Chancellor Saboo sir. We are here again, our very dear Shankaranarayan sir, as Joe sir mentioned about the topic that the levy and collection of GST that will be deliberated today. And we are truly grateful, that I should say, to Shankaranarayan sir for handling the session yesterday on supply and as well as today. Somebody who needs no introduction, I'm sure, from the yesterday session that you have all experienced. For us personally, we have had the great fortune to be experiencing him very regularly, and somebody who's very close to us, very close to our hearts, at all of us at the Kerala Chartered Accountant Fraternity. Wholeheartedly welcoming Shankaranarayan sir to the session today. I should take this great moment with a great happiness and pride that Roy sir, immediate past chairman, has put in so much of effort for the good interest of our teachers today, holding hands with Sajiman Abraham sir and Dr. Sulaiman sir. I should wholeheartedly thank, appreciate, and welcome C.A. Roy Varghese sir and Sajiman Abraham sir and Sulaiman sir. My most respected managing committee colleagues, vice chairman of the branch, C.A. K.V. Joe sir, Alan Joseph, treasurer of the branch, and senior chartered accountant N.L. Soman sir, who's also with us today, wholeheartedly welcoming you all as well. To my most respected gurus of younger generation, we seek your continued guidance and support, and wholehearted pranams to each one of you. Like I said, you have truly been instrumental for all of us, to have nurtured a career for the youngsters and for their future. Once again, wholeheartedly welcoming each one of you to the second day. Let's have a great time of learning ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman C.A. Ranjit R. Warrier.
Sir, you are not audible, sir. No, sir.
Thank you, Chairman C.A. Ranjit. I think our speaker does not require any introduction today, because the second day he was there in the first day itself, and taken on class on supply, and today it's on levy. But as a matter of custom, I would like to introduce our faculty for this afternoon, C.A. Shankaranarayan V. from Chennai. He's a chartered accountant and a cost and management accountant with more than a decade of experience in financial and taxation compliances spanning across diverse sectors, including indirect taxation. He's a member of GST study group of ICAI. He is a master trainer of GST affiliated by Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. He has trained more than 5,000 chartered accountants across India in GST law and practice. He was part of the training team of ICT team engaged in GST knowledge dissemination as part of Niti Aayog initiative. He author of the book Gain Smartly through Senvat Credit Rules 2004. He's a regular speaker on taxation at ICAI and also Institute of Cost Accountants of India and Institute of Company Secretaries of India. A regular speaker across various professional forums, training industry executives in niche areas of indirect taxation, including National Academy for Customs, Excise and Narcotics, Chennai. He is a partner in a Chennai-based CA firm heading the indirect taxation, compliance and litigation vertical. With these words, I invite our speaker, C.A. Shankaranaran sir, to commence the session.
Thank you, sir. Thank you to my colleagues in the ICAI Ernakulam. And let us start today's session at the right earnest. Just give me a moment, I'll share my screen. Yeah. So yesterday we had seen the basics of supply. Today, what we are going to see is with respect to the levy of GST and then collection of taxes, as well as a specific impetus on reverse charge and composition levy. So before we even discuss about the levy of GST, we have to be aware that GST recognizes two types of supply. Two major types of supply, because accordingly only the legal framework has been put in the GST law. Those two being intrastate supply and interstate supply. How to determine something is an intra or interstate is something which I will touch upon. But before that, what is the relevance of this intrastate supply and interstate supply is, whenever there is an intrastate supply, there is going to be an element of CGST and SGST on the transaction, as against an interstate supply in which the GST charged will be IGST. So that is the basic distinction. Hence, if it is an intrastate supply, CGST Act and SGST Act will come into picture, and those are the relevant provisions to refer to. If it is going to be an interstate supply, it will get attracted under the IGST Act. So that is the provision that one may have to resort to. So how to determine whether something is an interstate supply or an intrastate supply? A simple method in which we can determine is location of the supplier and the place of supply. These two elements need to be compared. The location of the supplier and the place of supply falls in the same state, then it is treated as intrastate supply. Now, where is it told? It is told in section 8 of the IGST Act, and that is from where we come to a conclusion that this is what is an intrastate supply. So location of supplier, place of supply. So here you will see that location of recipient directly does not determine the intra or interstate nature of the transaction. It is location of the supplier, but the other comparative is place of supply. Same way, if the location of the supplier and place of supply are in different states, obviously it is going to be a interstate supply. But before that, this location of supplier, to what extent the GST law is evolved and to what extent it gives us an insight is location of supplier of goods is something which is not even defined in the Act. Whereas location of supplier of service is defined in the GST law. Why? Because in case of goods, the movement of the goods is something which will be the primary determinant of a transaction. But in case of service, since there is no movement of goods, still how to determine from where the supplier rendered the service needs a definition. Hence, the definition has been given under location of supplier of service. So the location of supplier of service definition goes something like this, where a supply is made from a place of business for which a registration has been taken. Then that is the place it is deemed that from there only the service has been rendered to the recipient. Let us take for example, I have my firm in Chennai, I also have it in Bangalore. So I have it in Tamil Nadu and Karnataka. There is a client who is in Delhi. That client wants my services. I render my services to him. Now, which registration of mine, whether my registration in Tamil Nadu or my registration in Karnataka, which is the one which has rendered the services to my client in Delhi? That is the question which is answered by this. So the first part is from a place of business which is registered. But what happens in my case is my both places are registered. Then what happens? Then you have to go further into the definition. The definition says where a supply is made from a place other than a place of business for which registration has been obtained, then that location. But in this case, I did not make it from an other than a place of business for which registration is obtained. So if I have done it, the place of supply will be the place from which I rendered the service. So it doesn't matter whether I am registered or not. But if I am rendering it from a place, even if I am not registered in that place, that will be treated as the location of the supplier of service, is part B of this definition. And part C is the case that I explained earlier, where a Delhi client is serviced by my firm. But which part of the firm? Is it Tamil Nadu firm or is it the Karnataka firm? Which GST number has rendered the service? Whether the Tamil Nadu GST number or the Karnataka GST number. For that only they have given this definition deeper into the definition, saying that supply is made from more than one establishment. Then how to determine? Then determine based upon the location of the establishment which is most directly concerned with the provision of the supply. For example, they have given the order to Chennai and they have been interacting with my Chennai office. Then I will have to treat it as the supply has been made from my Tamil Nadu registration only. So this is how we need to determine the location of supplier of service. In case of goods, this is not required. That is why it is not even defined in the Act. But location of supplier of service is required to be determined. And in the absence of any such thing, the omnibus clause is given, which is if A, B, C, nothing is available, then please take the residence of the supplier as the location of the supplier of service. We cannot or we need not go any deeper. So that is where the definition ends also. So location of supplier, be it goods or service, is quintessential to determine whether a transaction is intra or interstate supply. We have done one part. Location of supplier, be it goods or service, how to determine, we have seen it. Now I'm not going to go deeper into the discussion of place of supply, but I'm just going to give you an introduction. How to go about finding out the place of supply. If one wants to find out the place of supply in case of goods, they need to look at section 10 and section 11 of the IGST Act. If you want to find out the place of supply of services, then where we need to look is section 12 and section 13 of the IGST Act. Now some of you might wonder why there are two sections, why can't they make it as one section? There is a logic behind it. Section 10 and 11 and 12 and 13 are split into two sections because the first of those sections, that is section 10 and 12, will apply to those scenarios where both of them are within India. Whereas 11 and 13, that is respectively for goods and services, will apply or kick in only when one of the party is in India, the other party is outside India. It could be the supplier who is in India. Then how to determine the place of supply? Then go to section 13 in case of services, section 11 in case of goods. It is the recipient who is in India. In that case, how to determine the place of supply? Then again 11 or 13 only, depending upon whether it is goods or service. So if both of them are not in India, we don't have to worry about GST because they are not in India. So there is no question of GST in that case. Only when any one of them happens to be in India or both of them happens to be in India, we need to find out this concept called place of supply. So what is the sanctity of this place of supply? Right from the day you started studying GST or got introduced to GST, you would have been used to a term called as destination-based consumption tax. That destination-based consumption tax requirement is fulfilled only when we find out the place of supply. If a transaction is happening only within the state of Kerala, supplier, recipient, both of them are within the state of Kerala, the tax that will be charged on the transaction is an intrastate supply transaction. So it will be typically CGST and SGST. CGST portion will go to union government. SGST portion will go to the state government. No qualms about it, no doubts on that. Whereas a transaction from Kerala is initiated making a supply to a person in Tamil Nadu. It is an interstate supply. How? Because the delivery is happening to a person who is in Tamil Nadu. The place of supply for the transaction happens to be Tamil Nadu. Location of supplier, Kerala. The place where the delivery is done is place where it is Tamil Nadu. So location of supplier is in Kerala. Place of supply is in Tamil Nadu. Then obviously the transaction will become interstate supply. When it becomes interstate supply, IGST needs to be charged on the transaction. In that case of IGST, when it is charged, IGST is nothing but a combination of CGST plus SGST. So IGST doesn't have a separate rate. It is a combination of CGST plus SGST. When we take CGST plus SGST and call it as IGST, fine. But which state will receive the state portion of that IGST? CGST 9%, SGST 9%. If it is an intrastate supply transaction, 9% will go to union government, which is CGST part. 9% will come to the state government, which is the SGST part. But suppose if it is a transaction of IGST, how this 9 pertaining to the state, one part is pertaining to the central government, which is 9%. That 9% will go to union government. It goes by way of IGST. There is no problem. But the other 9% in an IGST transaction, to which state it will go? In this transaction between Kerala and Tamil Nadu, to which state it has to go? It has to go to the state of Tamil Nadu, because GST itself is a destination-based consumption tax. But how will it be fixed? How will it be determined while doing a transaction? It is to be determined by determining the place of supply. When we find out this is what is the place of supply, and that we mention in the invoice, to that place of supply only, the IGST revenue will be shared by the central government. Hence, place of supply is the part in the GST law which satisfies the economic basic of GST, which is being a destination-based consumption tax. How to determine the destination? Place of supply determines the destination. Hence, I took a bit of time to determine or to convey to you how to determine the place of supply, because location of supply or place of supply, that combination is what is deciding whether a transaction is an intrastate supply or an interstate supply. Okay, with that in perspective, let's now move to the next part. So location of supplier and place of supply in the same state, it is intrastate supply. Location of supplier and place of supply are in different states, then it is considered to be interstate supply. And we do have certain unique transactions. Whenever we make supply to an SEZ, even if geographically the SEZ is within the same state, it is termed to be an interstate supply, because for all practical purposes, SEZ is considered as not being in India. The transaction with SEZ is considered to be zero rated. Hence, they have given the special status of transaction with SEZ being treated as interstate supply, though geographically they are in India. So in Kochi, there is an SEZ. A person in Ernakulam is billing to that SEZ person who is also there within 40 kilometers. Still, we need to call it as interstate supply. A supply between one SEZ to another SEZ is also called as interstate supply. And import of goods, SEZ, import of goods are the transaction between a person in India to a person outside India, all shall only be treated as interstate supply. Hence, intra and inter, the basic distinction once a person understands, then we can get into the discussion of levy. How levy operates? Like we discussed yesterday, the basic of any tax law is the taxable event and then the levy. The taxable event under GST is supply. We have seen that yesterday. Now, when we look at levy, there has to be a charging section in case of any tax law. And what the charging section has to convey? It has to convey very clearly, without any ambiguity, what is taxable and how it is to be taxed, who is the person who is liable to pay the tax. Now, these three basic questions must be addressed in the charging section. Else, it is not a well-conceived charging section. GST stands head and shoulders above any other law in India in terms of that. It is very clear in terms of the charging section. Now, how does that operate? I have taken the charging section, section 9 of the CGST Act. Like I told you, when a transaction is an intra-state supply, there are two elements. There is CGST, there is SGST. So the CGST portion is driven by the CGST Act. The SGST portion is driven by the SGST Act. So if someone says I have to read SGST separately, not required. That is what GST has done, especially for the tax professionals, a major saving grace. What it has done is that earlier, if I have to practice Kerala VAT, I have to study Kerala VAT, Karnataka VAT, Andhra Pradesh VAT, I have to study every state VAT law. But now in GST, if I study the CGST Act, I know all the 174 sections of CGST Act. Then I know all the SGST Acts also. How can I say that confidently? Is because SGST Acts across India in all the states are nothing but copy paste of CGST Act. Is it only copy paste? No, they have further activity to do. Microsoft has taught us, apart from Control C, Control V, it has also taught us Control H. Control H is find and replace. So wherever center was there in the CGST Act, they just replaced it with state. That's it. So it means CGST Act, if I know SGST Acts as well. There is no discard. There is no lack of harmony between these two. They are harmonious. Hence, if I know CGST, I can say I know SGST. Then what is the role of IGST Act? IGST is a very intelligent legal provision, because there they created that act with only 26 sections. With only 26 sections, but in one of the section, they have clearly said that anything that is there in the CGST Act with respect to the provisions of, let's say, collection of tax, everything will all apply in case of IGST Act also. So instead of redoing the whole exercise and defining what is registration, who is a person and everything, they simply said, I have created IGST Act only to define those unique scenarios which are applicable only for interstate supply. 26 sections. So everything else shall be borrowed from CGST Act, which effectively means IGST Act has got 200 sections, because 174 sections of the CGST Act plus 26 sections for its own purposes. So it is close to 200 sections is what IGST Act I would say. Now, from an intrastate supply perspective, the levy has to be looked upon in the CGST Act. From an interstate supply perspective, the levy has to be looked upon in IGST Act. Now, CGST Act section 9 is the primary charging section, and it has got 5 limbs to it, or 5 subsections to it, each catering to a specific need, a specific type of taxability. Now, subsection 1 deals with what we generally call as normal levy, and subsection 2 is dedicated for the petroleum products. Subsection 3 talks about RCM. In GST, we will come across many such 3-letter acronyms. Somehow they are fixated to the 3-letter acronyms like MGR, NTR, ANR and all. They also have this RCM, HSN. Even GST itself is a 3-letter acronym. So we have many such 3-letter things in GST. One such thing is RCM. In the expanded form, RCM means reverse charge mechanism. What it is and when all it is applicable, we will see as we go into the presentation. And for that RCM itself, they have dedicated 2 subsections, subsection 3 and subsection 4. Now the last one, subsection 5, is my favorite. Why? Because see, whenever somebody is making a supply, as we all have studied the basic, what is indirect tax? It is a tax which is collected from a person who is not the person who is bearing the burden of the tax. I go to a shop, I buy some product. He will charge me GST. Who is bearing the burden of GST? Me. I am only paying him GST. Now, what is the shopkeeper doing? He is only doing a postman's job. He is collecting the GST from me and he is remitting it to the government. But government will catch whom? If there is a GST related problem, they will not catch me. They will catch only the person, the sale person, the supplier. Hence, we know indirect tax means where the liability to pay is on one person, the burden is on the other person. So subsection 1 and 2 deals with typical indirect tax, where the supplier is liable to pay GST. Whenever there is a rule, there has to be an exception. Keeping up with that expectation, subsection 3 and subsection 4 are dedicated for reverse charge. That means situations covered under the subsection 3 and subsection 4, it is not the supplier who is liable to pay GST. It is the recipient who is liable to pay GST. That is why it is called as RCM, reverse charge mechanism, reverse charge. Subsection 5, as I told you, is close to my heart because that is very unique. Neither the supplier nor the recipient, some third party has to pay GST. So 2 subsections for supplier being liable to pay, 2 subsections for recipient being liable to pay, and 1 subsection for third party. What are these? We will see it in detail one by one. So let's first take up subsection 1 and subsection 2. Now, first we have to see subsection 2, then only subsection 1 will make relevance because subsection 1 is applicable subject to subsection 2. Hence, what is more important of these two? I would say subsection 2 is more important. And what does that subsection 2 says? It says any supply of goods or service. That is told in subsection 1. But subsection 2 talks about the supply of the following items, 5 items. I am somebody, I stopped studying science in 10th standard. That is why after 10th standard, I decided never science, so only commerce. So I do not know the difference between what is the logic or from where all this happens. But I have a crude logic. That is, I think that crude oil is the first element that you will get when you mine or dig deeper. And then when you filter it further, refinery process, you will get diesel, which is good enough, but not very good. And then you filter it further, you will get motor spirit or in other words, petrol, which is good enough to drive the vehicles, less polluting. And you refine it further, you will get aviation turbine fuel, which will be with almost nil pollution or very minimal pollution. And you further refine it. At the end of everything, it will become gas. So it is called natural gas. That is how I keep it in my mind. So I have conveyed to you how I keep it in my mind. I may not be right at all. I have got no right to say I know science. But these 5 items, crude oil, diesel, motor spirit or petrol, aviation turbine fuel, natural gas. For these 5 items only, GST is to be levied from a date to be notified, which means these 5 items. How do you treat these 5 items? Let me put a question which you can answer in the chat box like yesterday. So these 5 items, do you think, that is crude oil, diesel, petrol, aviation fuel, natural gas, are they not taxable as of today, or are they non-GST as of today? What is your view? Is it not taxable or is it non-GST? Please give your answers in the chat box. Is it not taxable or is it non-GST? There can be a third answer. Is it not taxable or non-GST? Okay. Now, let me put forth a further question directing you in a certain answer that I am trying to get. Tomorrow, the government decides to levy GST on these items. That is, bring these items under GST. Do they have to amend the act or do they just have to give a notification? The answer is they just have to give a notification, which means as of today, the power to levy is there. Moment a power to levy is there and it is kept in abeyance, it is to be classified only as not taxable. We cannot say non-GST. But tomorrow, they want to bring certain items which are not even under GST specifically excluded, like alcoholic liquor for human consumption, which is not even within the definition of GST. What do we call that? Or Schedule 3 transactions, which are not even treated as supply. That is when we need to think, or we need to say that those are the ones which are non-GST. So 9 subsection 2 items are not taxable as of today. They can become taxable any day. So these 5 items are the not taxable. Now, practically looking at it, do you think a petrol bunk will have to get registered under GST? Yes or no? We will go back to our easiest method of answering, single syllable answer. Whether it is yes or no. A petrol bunk, should they get registered under GST? Yes or no? Now, when a petrol bunk is selling petrol and diesel only, why should they get registered under GST? Because they are not even under GST. It is not taxable. But still, a petrol bunk will have to get registered under GST because a petrol bunk will not only be selling petrol and diesel, it will also be selling oil, coolant. Petrol is not a service. They are buying and selling petrol, which is goods. But they are selling oil, coolant, engine oil. And in some of the petrol bunks, they have rented the petrol bunk, part of it for ATM, part of it for supermarket. Now, all that is taxable under GST. So if I am strictly selling only petrol and diesel, I don't have to think about registration. I can stay aloof. But when I am doing other things as well, like I am selling oil or I am rendering some services, then I must get registered under GST. Okay. Now we'll move to the 9 subsection 1. So the first subsection has to be seen second, then only it will make much more sense. Subject to 9 subsection 2, which means all goods and services will be taxable under 9 subsection 1, except what is covered under 9 subsection 2. So these 5 will not come. But apart from this, whatever is there, all goods and services, when there is a supply, other than alcoholic liquor for human consumption, on their intrastate supply, because CGST or SGST will apply only on intrastate supply, a tax shall be levied called as Central Goods and Services Tax. And on what value it shall be levied? It shall be levied on the value as determined under section 15. So it is not enough that if the charging section says you are liable to pay, it should also tell on what I am liable to pay or how much I am liable to pay. I am liable to pay under GST. I am liable to pay GST, but under section 15, whatever is the valuation that is fixed for the product, on that value I have to pay, because the levy of GST, we call it as an ad valorem tax. What is an ad valorem tax? It is levied as a percentage. Percentage of what? It is levied as a percentage of the taxable value. Earlier in the central excise regime, in some of the cases in customs also, what we have is instead of levying GST as a instead of levying the tax as a percentage, they will simply say for 100 units you pay 20 rupees. So that is a product based tax. That is not a value based tax. GST is a value based tax. That is why it is called as ad valorem tax. It is levied as a percentage. Hence, the percentage is levied on a taxable value. So the taxable value has to be correct. How to determine whether my taxable value is correct or not? They have given that please follow the provisions of section 15. As per that, whatever value is determined, on that value you multiply the rate of GST. And the rate of GST is not to exceed 20%. For some of you, it might be a crude shock. Why 20%? GST is being charged at 28%. Now, you will have to just take a moment to understand that we are studying CGST Act. CGST cannot exceed 20%. So correspondingly, SGST cannot exceed 20%. In effect, CGST is now only 14% at the highest. CGST is not 28%. CGST is 14%. SGST is 14%. So combinedly, it is 28%. Hence, the CGST 9 subsection 1 says maximum rate is 20%. So the other indicator that we can understand from here is tomorrow the government wants to hike the current highest rate of CGST, which is 14%, to 16%. They don't have to go to the parliament for approval because they have already put in the section itself that it is 20% maximum they can go. That is what one needs to appreciate from this creation of headroom by the government, so that tomorrow they will not be hitting the roof. They can hit the roof in another 6%. They have room further. And alcohol, why is it kept out of the provision of GST? For that matter, both alcohol, as we jocularly refer, that is the human spirit as well as the motor spirit, both are kept outside the purview of GST. Why is it so? The rationale is two. I would say there are two dimensions to this rationale. From an alcohol perspective, with respect to alcohol, the Constitution of India takes alcohol under the state list, which means it is up to the state to determine whether they want to sell alcohol in that state or they want a total prohibition. It is not a central subject, it is a state subject. So right from the day our Constitution has been in place, the alcoholic liquor, sale of it, manufacture of it, there is an excise duty on manufacture of alcoholic liquor, but that is also collected by the state governments, whichever state government is allowing it. So the alcohol being a state subject, it is left to the state governments to decide from that time itself. And the second important thing in alcohol and petroleum products, the second dimension, why they are kept within the state's purview, is 99.99% of the times, alcohol and petroleum related transactions are cash and carry transactions. Hence, in these transactions, most of the times that you will see, the department will stand to get the money very quickly. It would not be a situation of taking a long duration. And especially in case of alcohol, there is a stage by stage levy. As far as I know, in Tamil Nadu, in case of VAT, we have a 3-stage tax for alcohol. Similar should be the situation in Kerala as well. So these two are the largest money spinners for the state government. Hence, state governments are naturally not inclined to get out of that. That is why when GST was proposed, petroleum products, they had to allow because it is goods. But when it came to alcohol, it required a constitutional amendment because it is in state list. Central government so far has not got a single rupee of revenue on that. So central government cannot run the meeting saying that I want alcohol related taxes because it doesn't have power at all. So unless a constitution is amended, alcohol can never come into GST. But petroleum products, yes, they are there inside GST as not taxable today. Any day in future, they can become taxable. Okay. The corresponding provision in the IGST Act is section 5, subsection 1. The charging section in the IGST law is section 5. And it says that same, that any supply of goods or services subject to 5 subsection 2 on interstate supplies. A tax is to be levied on the value of supply as determined under section 15, but the overall tax cannot exceed 40%. So since it is IGST, it is keeping a cap of 40%, and we see the current highest rate of tax being 28%. So this is the basic provision, or the 9 subsection 1 and subsection 2, or 5 subsection 1 and 5 subsection 2 of IGST Act, the first 2 parts of the levy. Now I have a question. Having gone through the definition of or the levy of IGST Act, it says that on all interstate supplies, there is a IGST. Now, do you think import of goods, is it taxable under GST? Import of goods, is it taxable under GST? Export of goods, is it taxable under GST? You can give your answers, yes or no. Import of goods, is it taxable under GST? Export of goods, is it taxable under GST? You should also keep in mind that there is customs. Good. So there are mixed answers. Yes, no, only on imports. Agreed. Because that is where we need to have the conceptual clarity. There is nowhere it is said, neither in the Constitution or any other legal precedents, that we cannot have 2 taxes on the same transaction. There can be. There have been in the past. So even in GST regime, we are seeing double taxes. That is, for example, your cinema ticket is an example. When you buy a cinema ticket, you will see a local body tax, which is an entertainment tax, plus including that value only GST will be charged. So there is no specific restriction on double taxation in India. It very much was there, continues to be there. but to a greater extent it is reduced because the cascading effect has to go. That is the purpose. But if you ask me legally, there cannot be a situation, then I'll say no, there can be a situation of double taxation. That is what happens in case of import and export of goods. I've tried preparing this matrix where import of goods is taxable under GST. It is specifically taxable under the IGST Act. Import of services taxable under the IGST Act. Export of goods taxable under the IGST Act. Export of services taxable under the IGST Act. The only difference is that Section 5 subsection 1 of the IGST Act has got a proviso by which the power to levy IGST on import of goods transaction has been delegated to the Customs Tariff Act. The power to levy GST on the import of goods has been delegated to the Customs Tariff Act, which means unless you have a power, how can you delegate the power? So IGST Act has very much got the power to tax the import transactions, import of goods or services, but it is preferring to delegate it to customs because customs is anyway charging a customs duty. Along with that customs duty, they are collecting something called as IGST. Now there we have to be careful that IGST should not be treated as IGST under the IGST Act. It is not an IGST under the IGST Act. It is an IGST under 3 subsection 7 of the Customs Tariff Act. Because if somebody is importing a good into India, there is no GST on it. What it means is that an individual who is manufacturing the product in India has to pay GST, but a person who is importing it into India has not a liability to pay GST. He only pays customs duty. Then there will be an disparity in the trade. To make the trade balanced, on import you will pay customs duty plus a tax equal to the tax that is being paid within India, that is a GST, which is called IGST, is being levied under customs. So the IGST that we see in a bill of entry is not a tax levied under the GST law. It is levied under the Customs Tariff Act. But does GST Act have the powers? Yes. Now let's take our understanding further. So one has to know that where are the notifications that I have to look to find out for taxes, what are the rates, and tax rate for goods, what is the rate, and for services, what is the rate. These are the notifications that we may have to resort to. For tax rate of goods, it is 1/2017. For services, it is 11/2017 under CGST. And you are looking at finding out the IGST rates together. Then you can go to 1/2017 for goods and 8/2017 in case of services. So these are the notifications that one may have to look up for finding the rate of tax. Now moving to the next part. The next part is subsection 3 and subsection 4. The two subsections which are dealing with a reverse situation where the supplier is not liable to pay, it is the recipient who is liable to pay. Now what is reverse charge mechanism? Generally, what is normal charge? This is what is a normal charge, or this is what is the way indirect tax should work. A supplier should make supply of goods or services to the recipient and he should charge GST. The recipient in turn should make the payment of tax along with the value of the goods. The supplier should retain the value of the goods and then make the tax payment to the department. This is what is a normal transaction under indirect tax. We have called it as normal charge because we have something called as reverse charge. Hence, we have to give it a name. So we are giving it a name called normal charge. Now look at reverse charge. Reverse charge is a situation where a supplier will supply goods or services to the recipient, but he will not charge GST. He will only show the basic value in his invoice. He will not pay GST. Supplier is not even liable to pay GST. Now what the recipient has to do is the responsibility to pay tax to the government is vested with the person who is the recipient. So the recipient will pay the tax to the government. He will pay the basic value to the supplier because that is contractual arrangement between them. But the tax has to be fulfilled, or the responsibility to pay the tax has to be fulfilled by the recipient. That is why it is called reverse charge. So this normal charge, we call it as forward charge, normal charge, whichever you prefer calling, you can call. But it is not reverse charge. That much I can convey to you, because what is reverse charge is specific. That the recipient is liable to pay, it is called specific. You can even call it as opposite of reverse charge, which is what is normal charge. Okay, now we have understood or got a glimpse of what is reverse charge. Now let us go and see how it is factored in the framework of GST. 9 subsection 3 talks about a notified reverse charge situation, whereas 9 subsection 4 talks about a situation where a person is procuring goods or services from unregistered person. Now let's look at 9 subsection 3 separately and 9 subsection 4 separately. First, I want to take 9 subsection 4 for the simple reason that it was brought into the GST law with a huge fanfare and a lot of agitation from the industry, and subsequently it was quietly withdrawn, I would say, from the GST law. What it was is, when a registered person is taking goods or services, that is, he is taking inward supplies, he is procuring goods or services from an unregistered person, then the GST law in its original form said that 9 subsection 4 will get involved, which means the person who is procuring it will have to pay GST under reverse charge. Goods or services, irrespective of what he is procuring, whatever tax is liable on the transaction, he has to pay. The one who is receiving it has to pay. But this had a huge impact across India. Many trade forums contested this. They requested the GST Council, and finally, though it was introduced on 1st July 2017, by 13th October 2017 itself, this was taken back, where they put 9 subsection 4 on a pause mode. They simply said, this provision shall not apply till 31st of March 2019 and 31st of March 2018. Then they postponed it to 31st of September 2018. Then they postponed it to September 2019. So currently, it is completely diluted. And if I am procuring from unregistered person, I have to pay GST, is a legal provision which is applicable currently only for a real estate builder. Apart from him, for nobody this provision is applicable. So people are free to buy from unregistered people without getting into the clutches of reverse charge under 9 subsection 4. So that is all with respect to 9 subsection 4. Let us look at 9 subsection 3. 9 subsection 3 talks about situation where the government will notify. Notify what? Notify the goods, notify the services, which will get covered under reverse charge. These goods, these services, when you procure from somebody, irrespective of the fact that from whom you are procuring is a registered person or unregistered person, irrespective of that fact, if these goods or these services are procured from an unregistered person, you will have to pay GST under reverse charge, the notified goods, the notified services. The list of those we will see as we get into the presentation further. Now let us look at subsection 5. The 9 subsection 5 talks about a third party levy. As I told you earlier, what is a third party levy? Let's see that any services which are supplied through an e-commerce operator. So it is not applicable in case of goods. It is applicable only in case of services. Any supply of services through an e-commerce operator Are you able to see my screen? Is there any technical difficulty in seeing the screen or hearing my voice? I hope there is no problem, so I can continue. Okay, fine, good. Thank you. Thanks for your confirmation. So 9 subsection 5 envisages a situation where services are rendered through an e-commerce operator. Then it is not the supplier, it is not the recipient, it is the e-commerce operator who is liable to pay GST. Even if the e-commerce operator is not physically present in India, it is intended that he has to appoint a representative in India who needs to pay GST. Now, I like this section specifically because when the government decides to tax you, you cannot escape. The proof is this subsection. You have in your mind for a moment Uber, and you look at this section, you will feel this subsection is created only for the purpose of taxing Uber. How? I'll tell you. Uber is a digital platform, an e-commerce operator who is not even in India. He doesn't have a place of business in India. He's sitting outside India having a server there. But people get enrolled into that Uber. There is a cab driver who is enrolling in that Uber, who is a supplier. There is a person like you and me who will book a Uber to go from point A to point B. So we are the recipients. But this is a service rendered through an e-commerce operator, which is notified. Not all the services rendered through e-commerce operator come under 9 subsection 5. Certain services to be notified by the government, which they have notified. very religiously they have notified. The first service that was notified was this taxi hiring. So when I book a cab through Uber, the supplier of the service is the cab driver. The recipient of the service is me. But neither the supplier needs to pay GST to the department, nor the recipient needs to pay GST. But I, as a recipient, will suffer GST because it will be collected from me. Who will collect it? E-commerce operator. Uber India will have to collect it, and they will have to make the payment to the department. Uber India is not even incorporated in India. That is why they have inserted the last line. The last line is, you should have an authorized representative in India, and that representative should pay the tax. So I am agreeable to the fact that you may not be in India, but still the government says you pay me the tax through a representative. So that is why across India, Uber has got registration and Uber is paying GST in India because of 9 subsection 5. And it is not just Uber who has got caught in this. 3 services have been notified so far. One is radio taxi, which is pertaining to Uber, be it hiring of any kind of vehicle or cab. And then the other 2 are the accommodation booking services. What you can keep in your mind for easy recollection is OYO or GoIBO, these kind of people. But there the RCM will kick in. That is, reverse charge will neither reverse charge nor forward charge. I would say this is a third party charge. Third party charge will kick in only when the hotel or the place which is being booked, they are not registered. If that hotel is registered and they say, sir, we will pay GST, then this 9 subsection 5 will not come. The hotel itself will take care of the liability under 9 subsection 1. And services by way of housekeeping or plumbing or carpenting or AC fixing and all that, in those cases, GST, again 9 subsection 5 will come. The common example for that I would give is the service app called as Urban Clap, which was the earlier name. Now it is called Urban Company. And then we have this service tree. These kind of people where you can hire any such services through them. They will connect us to the engineer, or they will connect us to that the architect or the technician who will come and do the service. But in that case, if that person who is rendering the service is not registered and he is not liable to pay GST, then this third party, the one who is operating that e-commerce website or app, he is the one who is liable to pay GST under 9 subsection 5. So these are in essence the 5 limbs of the charging section. 9.1 and 9.2. 9.1 covers everything except 9.2, and 9.2 talks about the 5 products relating to petroleum which are to be brought under GST from a date to be notified. 9.3 is notified reverse charge. Specific goods, specific services, we will see them as we go into the presentation. 9.4 is unregistered procurement reverse charge, which is currently applicable only for a builder. And 9 subsection 5, third party charge. When it is applicable for notified services where neither the supplier nor the recipient, the e-commerce operator, is liable to pay GST, and it is applicable only in case of services rendered through e-commerce operator. It is not applicable for goods supplied through e-commerce operator. For example, I am ordering an item in Flipkart, but the goods are supplied by Mr. X. X is a supplier in Flipkart. I am a recipient in Flipkart. In this transaction, tax has to be paid by Mr. X only. It will not be responsibility of Flipkart, because what is transacted through the e-commerce operator is not a service, it is goods. So only services will get attracted under 9 subsection 5, and there again only notified services. Now let's look at something which we saw yesterday to reiterate our understanding. Yesterday we saw what is taxable supply, what is exempted supply, not taxable, nil rated and non-GST. Now let me put forth a few questions. Try to see whether you can give me an answer. Electricity, what do you think? Is it a goods or a service or a non-GST supply? Electricity, is it good or service or non-GST? You can resort to the chat box to give your answer. Good, we have got answers, but I have to disappoint you by saying that none of this is right. The answer for electricity is that electricity is goods. It is intangible, no doubt, but electricity is goods. It comes under HSN 27. electrical energy is goods, but transmission and distribution of electricity is a service. Manufacture of electricity is goods. Transmission and distribution is only considered as a service. So electricity is goods. Why we need to know this? Then only we'll be able to see what is non-GST supply, what is a supply which is not taxable. Not taxable, we just saw. What all can come under 9 subsection 2. What is non-GST is what cannot even come under GST, the schedule 3 transactions. And zero rated supply, as we discussed yesterday, anything that is supplied to a person outside India, exports, or any goods or services supplied to an SEZ, special economic zone. Those are the ones which are considered to be zero rated. And the primary reason I have segregated taxable and zero rated on one side and exempted not taxable and nil rated on the other side is because when my output is taxable or zero rated, that is when I'll be entitled to take input tax credit. In GST, there is a huge concept called as input tax credit. I'll be able to take input tax credit only if my output is taxable or zero rated. In all other cases, I'm not entitled to take input tax credit. Hence, identifying what is the type of supply is of paramount importance, not just for reporting, but for compliance also in GST. Let's move further and see those goods and those services which will come under reverse charge in GST. The goods which are notified under notification 13/2017 in line with the expectation of 9 subsection 3. Goods on which the recipient is liable to pay GST are the ones that you see on your screen. Cashew nuts, tendu leaves, tobacco leaves, silk yarn, raw cotton, and most important, again, as I said yesterday, Kerala, lottery. When these items are procured by a person, let's say cashew nut, tendu leaves, or tobacco leaves, if these are procured, raw cotton, these are procured from an agriculturist, then the agriculturist need not register and pay GST. It is the one who is procuring it needs to pay GST. Cashew nut, I mean, not the peeled and ready cashew nut. Cashew nut here, it means that it is the cashew nut which is raw. It is not even extracted from the fruit. That type of cashew nut, tendu leaves, tobacco leaves, raw cotton, it is procured from an agriculturist. It is the recipient who is liable to pay GST, not the supplier. Lottery. The state government of Kerala is printing the lottery. Who will pay GST? From them, it is being procured. From the government of Kerala, state government of Kerala, it is being procured by the distributors. When they procure, they are the ones who are liable to pay GST under reverse charge. That is how it has been kept. So, RCM on lottery tickets is not applicable on the end person who is buying the lottery ticket and waiting for the draw to happen. The lottery ticket RCM is being paid by the distributor when he is procuring it from the government, the lottery tickets. And when somebody is procuring the goods sold by central government, state government, union territory, or local authority, when will they send goods? They will generally have various departments where there could be a confiscation. For example, in case of the GST department itself, somebody is not paying tax, they will do confiscation of their goods and then they will auction it. Customs. Goods are imported by somebody who is not ready to pay tax or he is not entitled to import those goods, they can auction it. Same way, police department, accident vehicles which are abandoned, they will auction it. Like this, any type of sale of used vehicles, seize or confiscated goods, old or used goods, or waste or scrap, anything that is sold by central government, state government, union territory, or local authority to a person who is registered, then the registered recipient is liable to pay GST under reverse charge. So these are the scenarios where the person who is receiving goods will pay GST under reverse charge under 9 subsection 3. Let's now look at those services on which reverse charge will be applicable. One of the famous services on which reverse charge will be applicable is called as a GTA service, Goods Transport Agency service. In this case of Goods Transport Agency service, that person who is a GTA, Goods Transport Agent, has got two options in front of him. One, he can collect 12% GST, that is 6% CGST, 6% SGST from his customers. Then there is no reverse charge. that GTA can collect and pay tax. But if the GTA does not want to collect and pay tax, then he can keep quiet. Thereby, what will happen is, if the recipient happens to be a factory, society, or a person who is registered under GST, or a body corporate, or a partnership firm, or an association of persons, or a casual taxable person, anybody, the recipient will become liable to pay GST under reverse charge on the freight that he is paying to a GTA. So for the sake of clarity, who is a GTA? GTA is a person who does transportation of goods by road, and he issues a consignment note as a proof that he has done the transportation. So he is what is called as a GTA. And the GTA, when he is rendering services and he doesn't want to charge 6 plus 6, 12%, the recipient happens to be any one of this: a factory, society, cooperative society, or a registered person under GST, body corporate, partnership, AOP, or BOI, or a casual taxable person, doesn't matter. Then the recipient is only liable to pay GST under reverse charge. Service number 1. Then any services, legal consultancy services by an advocate. Legal consultancy services by an advocate, when it is taken, that service is taken by a business entity, who is liable to pay GST? GST is liable to be paid by the recipient, not the advocate. So the advocate can render services. Advocate does not have to collect and pay GST. In fact, advocate need not even get registered as GST. Who is liable to pay the GST is only the recipient, who is liable to pay GST. Legal consultancy services. Now here we have to be clear. Any services by an advocate is not covered under reverse charge. It is only legal consultancy services by an advocate is covered under reverse charge. For example, if an advocate is doing legal consultancy plus he is also a Vastu consultant, then for his Vastu consultancy income, he has to pay GST under normal charge. Only for his legal consultancy services, there is an element of reverse charge to be paid by the recipient. And then the next reverse charge is sponsorship services. Sponsorship of an event, sponsorship of a name. We see many such sponsorships like Vivo IPL, Byju's cricket team, something like that. So wherever there is a sponsor. So it is not talking about the sponsor in terms of donation and all. We are not talking about that sponsorship. The sponsorship is propagating the name of my company, propagating my brand. I'm trying to have sponsorship of events, sponsorship of particular product and everything. Those sponsorships, it is not the supplier who is liable to pay GST. It is the recipient who is liable to pay GST under reverse charge. For example, we see that in Virat Kohli's bat, the words MRF will be written. Now, MRF, do they manufacture bats? Certainly not. It is Madras Rubber Factory. They manufacture only rubber tires. But they have given close to 8 crores to Virat Kohli to display the name of MRF in his bat. Now, this 8 crores is received by Virat Kohli as a matter of sponsorship. To propagate the name of MRF, he is using that bat. So now that 8 crores is taxable. It is taxable and the tax is to be paid not by Virat Kohli. It is MRF who is the recipient of service, because Virat Kohli is only rendering service. What service he is rendering? He is rendering sponsorship service. And his service has been taken by MRF. So MRF will have to pay 8 crores to Virat Kohli and pay 18% of that 8 crores under reverse charge to the department. Now, let's look at the next RC. Any services a person receives from the central government, state government, union territory government, or local authority. In these cases, the recipient of the service is liable to pay GST under reverse charge. So it is not the government department which will collect a tax. It is the recipient who is liable to pay GST under reverse charge. Let me post a question for understanding this. I have taken license. I have taken license from the government to mine for metals. It could be metals or ore. I am trying to do mining. I have got the mining license from the union government, or I have got the mining license from the state government. Now this mining license, I have obtained it from the ministry concerned. whichever ministry is that, Ministry for Iron Ore, from them I have got the license. For that license, I have paid something like 300 crores. Now, on this 300 crores, which I have paid as a fee for doing the mining, there is an element of GST. But that GST is to be paid. What is your view? Is it to be paid, collected and paid by the government, or is it to be paid by the recipient under reverse charge? What is your view? Supplier or recipient? That is government or recipient? You can give your answers in the chat box. Who's liable to pay GST? Yes, it is the recipient who is liable to pay GST, not the supplier. The supplier is government. Similarly, for example, 2G license, 3G license, 4G license. Now we have come to 5G license. In all this case, it is the telecom company who is getting the license is liable to pay GST under reverse charge. It is not the Department of Telecommunication. They will only give you the license. On that license fee, 18% GST, you will have to pay. Now, moving to the next part. Supply of services by a director. Supply of services by a director of a company or a body corporate to the company or the body corporate. Now, how will a director render services? A director will render services in two ways. One, we can say a director could be a employee director. In other words, whole-time director or managing director. That is one scenario. The second scenario is he can be a director. That's it. Which means in that case, he will be not visiting it on a daily basis. He will be attending the board meeting and giving its inputs. What is the difference between the first scenario and the second scenario? In the first scenario, the service is rendered by a director to the company where he is an employee director. It is called as employer-employee relationship. It will get squarely covered under Schedule 3. There is no question of GST on the transaction. But when the director is not an employee and he attends only the meeting and he takes sitting fees from the company, then he is rendering services to the company. For his services, it is the company which is liable to pay GST under reverse charge. So one more service on which the recipient is liable to pay GST under reverse charge. Next, any services of transfer or permitting right to use, copyrights. Copyrights other than books. Best example would be a music piece or a photography or a painting. In these cases, what happens is it is the recipient. The artist might have created the art or the music director might have created the music, but it is the producer of the movie or the music company which has made them do this music video, or the publisher of the book who is taking the photograph from the person who has done the painting. It is them who is the recipient. They are the ones who are liable to pay GST under reverse charge, and it is not a situation where they will collect tax. That is, the music composer or a photographer or an artist, they will not collect tax. It is the recipient of their services is the one who is liable to pay GST under reverse charge. And further, security services. This is an amendment which has come into being only from 2019. Any security services by a person who is not a body corporate. Now in GST law, body corporate means a company or any other person other than an LLP who are different from its owners, then it is considered to be a body corporate. So if the supplier is not a body corporate, but is rendering services to a registered person who is a body corporate, then the body corporate who is the recipient of the service is only liable to pay GST under reverse charge. So for example, university, there is a security. That security agency is not a body corporate. They happen to be an individual or a partnership. Then in that case, it is the liability of the university, because university is a registered person. The university is only liable to pay GST under reverse charge. Now, the another reverse charge which was introduced towards the end of 2019 was renting of any motor vehicle. Renting of any motor vehicle by any person, that is the one who is giving it on rental is a person other than a body corporate. Then the one who is receiving that service is only liable to pay GST under reverse charge. So when I am getting a motor vehicle on rent, the person who is giving the motor vehicle on rent to me says that I will charge 6 plus 6, 12%, then there is no reverse charge. But he says, I will not charge you any GST, then in those cases, or he says I will charge 5%. In those cases, it is the recipient who is liable to pay GST under reverse charge. And the other important service coming under reverse charge is any person who is located in a non-taxable territory, he is rendering services to a person in taxable territory. That is, outside India person is rendering services to a person in India. Then it is a clear case of import of service. Yesterday we saw the discussion around import of service when we discussed about 7.1b. So in case of import of services, who is in India? Only the recipient is in India. So the department does not want to complicate things by making the supplier pay GST. What they have said is, come, you are in India, no, you pay GST. That is what they have done. So it is the recipient who is liable to pay GST in case of import of services. Further, the very, very contentious issue that is going on in GST at the present moment. That is, whenever I am importing goods from outside India, where there is a freight, obviously when goods are coming from India, outside India to India, there has to be a freight element that is incurred. That freight, if it happens to be ocean freight, then the person who is in India and receiving the goods is the one who is liable to pay GST on that ocean freight under reverse charge. Because the person who is rendering the services of that ocean freight is situated outside India. So the one who is receiving the goods is considered to be the person who is receiving that service. Hence, they are made liable to pay GST under reverse charge on this ocean freight. The same provision is not applicable for air freight. It is applicable only in case of ocean freight. Now, we come to a situation where we need to discuss about the composition levy. So, section 9 of the CGST Act, we saw that it is dealing with the concept of levy under GST. And there we saw the 5 subsections and respective subsections, what it caters to. And 9 subsection 3 was the section which we took up and we discussed in detail what are all the services which would come under reverse charge. And those services as well as the goods which would come under reverse charge where the recipient is liable to pay GST. We have seen that part as well. So now we need to see the element of composition levy. What is composition levy? That is also a levy, but composition levy is different from section 9. It is levied under section 10(1). And second thing is, it is primarily intended or aimed at people who are having lesser turnover. In other words, the micro or very small enterprises. For them only, this composition levy will come into picture. How it has been envisaged is, it is envisaged, it was originally envisaged in a different way, subsequently got modified, and what they have said under subsection 10, under section 10 of the CGST Act, subsection 1 is that if you are a manufacturer or you are a person who is supplying food and drink except alcoholic liquor for human consumption, which is what is covered under Schedule 2, or you are any other person. So if you are not a manufacturer, you are not a person who is supplying food, then what can you call? You can be a trader, but you cannot be a service provider. You can be a manufacturer or a trader. Service, only one service is allowed. That is a person who is supplying food or drink other than alcoholic liquor for human consumption. These three, what is the tax? It is 2.5% CGST plus 2.5% SGST for the one who is supplying food. For other people, it is 0.5% CGST, 0.5% HGST, which means in a transaction, they need to pay only 1% tax. A huge, substantial reduction in tax liability. But of course, it will always come with a restriction. See, whenever there is a benefit given by the government on one end, they will always take away a certain benefit that is enjoyed on the other side. So what is it that is given is a lesser tax. Let's say I am a provision store, which is just at the end of the road. My overall turnover in a year is not going to exceed a certain limit. The limit has been fixed as of now as 1.5 crores. As 1.5 crores, except the special states, special category states, where it has been fixed as 75 lakhs. So generally, apart from most of the northeastern states, in all other parts of India, be it Tamil Nadu, Kerala, or Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, everywhere it is 1.5 crores. If my overall turnover is not going to exceed 1.5 crores, then I have a right to be asking for this composition levy. That means I become eligible to seek composition levy. Only if my turnover has not exceeded 1.5 crores when in the previous year. I was not even doing business in the previous year. I have started my business only in the current year. Then still you can opt for composition because you are starting the business only now. You may call yourself as last year turnover as 0. So there is no worry or problem in that. You can call that you are entitled for or eligible for composition. So the eligibility of composition is a particular turnover. You should not have breached that. 1.5 crores is the turnover as of today for other than northeastern region. For northeastern region, it is 75 lakhs. Fine, I have become eligible. What should I do? Then you should not be suffering from the ineligibility. There are certain goods, there are certain activities which you are not supposed to do. If you do that, if you deal in those goods, then you will become disentitled for composition levy. And you will have to do the compliance as envisaged under the provisions of section 10 of the CGST Act for dealing with the composition levy related matters. That is, you need to pay tax on a quarterly basis. You need to file return once in a year. So these are the return filing expectations or the compliance related expectations from a composition taxable person. Now let us see the provisions of pertaining to composition taxable person a little in detail. The composition taxable person should never collect tax from his recipients. That is why this composition levy opted persons, they will not issue a tax invoice. They will only issue a bill of supply because they are not entitled. They should not collect tax from their recipients. At the same time, they have been given a huge benefit in terms of 18% goods being allowed to be sold by them with 1% tax only. Hence, the government says, I will not give you input tax credit also. So when you opt for composition levy, you are denied the benefit of input tax credit. You cannot take input tax credit under GST. And then, if you are a person who is dealing in, that is, if you are dealing with any services other than the service that we saw, that is supply of food and drink, other than alcoholic liquor for human consumption. If you deal in any other services other than this, composition scheme will not be eligible for you. If you deal in goods, there again, if you deal in goods which are not taxable, or you deal in goods, you make interstate supply, one state to another, you become disentitled or you become ineligible to opt for composition. And if you are selling your goods through an e-commerce operator, you are enrolled in Flipkart, through that you want to sell, you are enrolled in Amazon, you want to sell through them, then you are enrolled with any e-commerce operators and you want to make a supply through the e-commerce operators, you can never opt for composition scheme. So these are ineligibilities. You should not acquire any of this ineligibility. If you acquire, you will become disentitled for being in composition scheme or opting for composition scheme. And further, if you are a person who is into manufacture of what? Manufacture of any of these items. Now I want you to pay attention to the word manufacture. They never said trader. It is only manufacturer. If I am a person who is a manufacturer of ice cream or edible ice or pan masala, gutka or the like, and all goods which are tobacco oriented goods, or if I am a manufacturer of aerated water, in all these situations, if this is going to be my manufactured output, I will never be entitled to go under composition levy. I cannot take composition levy. So if I want to continue within composition levy, one, I should be satisfying the eligibility condition, and two, most important, I should not be suffering from any of the ineligibilities which are contemplated under the provisions of section 10. Now this is how the initial part of composition levy was there, but subsequently many service providers, see, this is all focused only on goods suppliers. I can be a small provision store, I can be a kirana shop, all that, I can enjoy this benefit because I'm only supplying goods. But there were genuine service providers whose turnover was very less, but they wanted to have a scheme like composition scheme where they will be not have to be paying a huge amount of tax. So when they made the representation from 2019 onwards, 2019-20 financial year to be precise, the department brought something called as composition levy for service providers also. So the composition levy for service providers stands something like this, where the service provider whose turnover has not exceeded 50 lakh rupees. Now, when we spoke about goods related composition levy, with an exception of one service, that is food related service included, that time we saw the overall turnover shall not exceed 1.5 crores in the previous financial year. Then you can avail in the current financial year the benefit of composition. But in case of services, the turnover limit is not 1.5 crores, it is only 1/3 of that. It is only 50 lakhs. As a service provider, if a turnover has not exceeded 50 lakhs, then you can opt for composition under services. But the condition is, if you have opted for composition of goods, you should never supply any service. If you have opted for composition of service, then you should never supply any goods. So as a person who has opted for composition levy of services, we should never supply any goods. And you need to pay GST, CGST 3%, SGST 3%. All other conditions similar to goods related legislations are applicable for service related composition levy also. Namely, they cannot do interstate supply, they cannot charge GST separately, they cannot give a tax invoice, they should not collect a tax, they cannot avail input tax credit. All these restrictions are applicable for a service provider also who is opting for composition scheme. So composition levy for goods and composition levy for services is what we currently have, and a person can opt, depending upon what type of person he is, whether he is a supplier of goods or a supplier of service, he can opt for composition. Now the composition levy, the process or the procedure, how you get into composition is when you are applying for your registration itself. When we are filing the REG1 registration document, the request for registration, at that time itself we can make an intimation that I want to get registered as a composition taxable person. Suppose you are a person who is already registered and you are continuing your business. In this year you want to opt for composition, that is also possible, but it can be done only prior to the commencement of a financial year. You cannot do it midway to the financial year. It has to be done before commencement of the financial year. Hence, generally, the person who is opting for composition, they will give the option, keep the option open in the GST website from March 1st of the previous financial year itself. So you have 1 month time, right, from March 1st to 31st of March to decide and opt for composition scheme. So that next financial year, from 1st of April, you will not have to pay tax under the normal levy, which is section 9. You will pay tax under the composition levy, which is section 10. And for doing this, we submit an intimation. That intimation is what is called as CMP 02. That needs to be filed, with which our composition intimation will be given to the government, and then you can get into composition from the commencement of the next financial year. And as I said earlier, when they are getting into composition, they need to submit whatever is their inventory that is lying in their hands on the day on which they are opting for composition, and that needs to be submitted within 60 days. And their compliance under GST is generally they need to pay their 1% tax or 2.5 plus 2.5 in case of food and beverage, or 3 plus 3 6% as the case may be. They need to pay it on a quarterly basis to the government, and whatever they pay on a quarterly basis, together they have to furnish the information in a return which is to be filed only on a yearly basis. So they don't have the responsibility or they don't have the liability to file return on a monthly or a quarterly basis. They need to file only on a yearly basis. Payment of tax has to be done on a quarterly basis. So these are the provisions surrounding the composition levy, where a person can opt to become a person under composition scheme, subject to him satisfying the eligibility conditions and him not getting attracted under the ineligibilities under the provisions of Section 10 of the CGST Act. So with that, I've completed whatever that is intended to be covered today. So what I'll now do is I'll stop my screen share, and any questions you have, we will take those questions. Either you may unmute and ask those questions, or you can post your questions on the chat box.
No questions? Is
Whose
so there is
aggregate
one.
turnover for registration differ from composition taxpayer? The aggregate turnover for the purpose of registration is the same under Section 22, which is requiring us to get registered once we cross a particular turnover limit. But when we are applying for registration, we can choose. For example, if you are a person who is dealing only in goods, unless your turnover exceeds 40 lakhs, you don't have the liability to get registered under Section 22. If you opt for that, till crossing 40 lakhs, you don't get registered. The moment you cross 40 lakhs, you get registered. At the time, what you can do is you can apply. When you are applying for registration itself, you can mention that I want to go in for composition scheme. Then the person will go under composition scheme. If you say that no, I will go under normal scheme, you can go under normal scheme while you are submitting the registration. If you are not a person who is dealing only in goods, then the limit is 20 lakhs. So that aggregate turnover calculation, whether it is a person who is going to opt for composition or who is not going to opt for composition, who is going to go for normal taxation, in both of the cases, it is the same. There is no separate calculation for that. But the moment you get registered, you become a taxable person. Who is a taxable person under GST is the one who is liable to pay GST. So the moment you have got registered, you are liable to pay GST. From there on, if you had opted for composition, accordingly you will have to fulfill your obligation. Or if you had opted for normal levy, you have to fulfill your obligation accordingly. Will hawkers and peddlers be charged to GST as they deal with cash transactions and no formal transaction will happen? Okay, here I want to again reiterate, 20 lakhs is the general time limit or a general financial limit that has been fixed for turnover. Or it could be 40 lakhs if you are dealing only in goods. If you think the hawkers and peddlers can hit that 20 lakhs or 40 lakhs and still manage to stay away from the tax net, yes, they can very well stay away. There is a famous saying in Tamil, no, who's a thief? It is not a person who is stealing. The person who is caught is the thief. So that is what happens in tax as well. You are not a tax evader until you are caught by the department. The day department catches you, that is when they will call you as a person who has offended the law.
Any more doubts we can post in the chat or question answer box. Or questions?
Lottery distributor pays GST in forward charge. No, he pays under reverse charge, because the lottery is issued or authorized and given, the lottery itself is operated by the state government. So when he is procuring the tickets from the state government, he is the one who is liable to pay under reverse charge. He is procuring lottery, mind you, is actionable claim, and actionable claim is goods. So he is procuring goods from government. So he is liable to pay GST under reverse charge. The distributor only pays under reverse charge when he is procuring from the government. Whether they collect GST from ultimate consumer. I think you are asking about lottery. Yeah, if it is about lottery, yes, see, the lottery ticket is priced at 100 rupees, let's say. When it is priced at 100, the state government doesn't give it at 100. The state government gives it at a lesser price to the distributor, so that the distributor can sell it at 100 and still make a margin. So when the distributor is procuring the lottery ticket at 100 rupees from the state government, depending upon what is the amount of tax, some of the lottery tickets are taxable at 12%, some of them are taxable at 28%. So accordingly, what he will do, he will assume that the 100 rupees is inclusive of GST. So he will calculate into, that is 100 into 12 by 112 or 28 by 128. That is how he will calculate the GST and pay to the department. So the distributor is the only person who will pay GST on the lottery. From him, anybody is buying, or any other person who is further taking it, would, when they buy it for 100 rupees, they would have already suffered the GST in full. So there is no need for them to pay GST one more time. Okay. From yesterday's class, an example of easement, please. Easement, as I was saying, generally where we see it is in immovable property related transaction, where I have got a piece of land and you also have a land. Your land is near to the road. So I want access to the road. My piece of land, I want access to the road. So what I tell you is, just give me 10 by 40, 10 feet by 40 feet length. You allow me so that I will use it for my purposes. So you may do two things. Either you can sell that piece of land to me, or you can say, no, let that land be in my name, but I will allow you to use it. Many cases in industries also this happens, where the land that is shortcut or the route to reaching their factory might be somebody else's owned land. So they will seek the right to operate through their premises. That is what is called as easement. And for that, it is a taxable service. We cannot call it as a rental. It is an easement and it is taxable as a service under GST. Schedule 2 also covers it. Says that it is a service. Can you please give some example of actionable claims? Any transaction where I have a right to claim something. For example, a bill of exchange, a check, a promissory note. It is an actionable claim because you give me a promissory note saying that on this day I will pay you so much of money. It is an actionable claim. That actionable claim, when I am transferring it to somebody, it is considered to be a supply. But in GST, they don't want that to be a supply. Hence, they have said actionable claim, apart from betting, gambling, and lottery, will never be treated as a supply under GST. But strictly speaking, endorsing it in your name, that bill of exchange or a promissory note, is also a transaction in actionable claim. Legally, I have a right to collect debtors, sundry debtors which are sitting in my debit side of the balance sheet or asset side of the balance sheet. That is considered to be an actionable claim. I made a sales to you. I have the right to collect the money from you. I'm just waiting for the credit period to get over. The debtor is considered to be an actionable claim. I can convert the debtor into a securitized transaction and I can further transact with it. That is an actionable claim. So actionable claim is the right to receive money, which is now present not as in money, it is in a different form. Subsidy as consideration. Can subsidy be a consideration? I'm not sure. And especially if it is going to be a government subsidy, it can never be a consideration. Any subsidy from government need not form part of consideration at all. It's a specific exclusion or the specific denial given in section 15 subsection 2 when it comes to valuation. But if it is a subsidy given by other than government, for example, there is a famous situation. A prestigious school in Chennai. His father was approaching the school for getting an admission for his son. He was not getting it. 2 years later, he got the admission because he constructed a badminton court and he donated it to the school. Now, the construction cost and maintenance cost of the badminton court is a subsidy, strictly speaking, because he has given it to them, and that is a consideration on which this guy has been given the admission into the school. So, if you can look at a commercial transaction like this, where something else has transpired between them, between the supplier and the recipient, something else has changed hands, and that is in the nature of reducing the value of this original transaction, then that subsidy will be termed as part of the consideration, and that government will charge GST.
Our Sajiman sir, Clayman sir, anything to be added? So we are getting thanks for clearing all the doubts.
Is the reverse charge mechanism only applicable to service? No, it is applicable both for goods and service. And even cited the examples of lottery ticket, raw cotton, tendu leaves, tobacco leaves, and goods which are sold off by the government departments. In those cases also, reverse charge is very much applicable. 9 subsection 3.
Was this answered, sir? Should a composition dealers pay tax on quarterly or annual basis?
They have to pay tax on a quarterly basis. They have to file return on an annual basis.
So Rohit sir, can we wind up?
Yes, yes, I think no more questions. I believe that it was an excellent session presentation, not only today, yesterday also. As we mentioned yesterday itself, Sanganan sir was taking classes just like feeding small kids, and word by word, profession by profession, very simple way he was taking class. I think I'm quite sure everyone, those who heard the session today and yesterday, definitely they would have benefited from this these two sessions. And I don't know how to thank Secretary sir, because again I'm repeating because yesterday was just like a savior for all of us. And because since Adar Kumar Gupta sir was not physically well, so he made an excuse. But at a short notice, I think getting a faculty for this particular session was quite difficult. Since Sanganan was an authority on GST, I can very well say that is a excellent faculty, a sought after faculty, and not only that, a very good friend of ICAR Ernakulam branch. So he came, and I'm sure he conquered all of your hearts, no doubt, with this beautiful presentation. I was just going through that what Sangeeta madam was writing, excellent presentation. So this is going to be one of the best presentation which you might have ever heard, and we hope that in the future coming days also it will be excellent presentation. So I should thank Sanganan sir for the excellent presentation, for his magnanimous gesture for the 2 days consecutively, and hope to see you in the future also, sir, in more and more programs with the ICAR Ernakulam branch under this. That's what I want to tell you. How to Jose, I think, Jose, please.
Thank you, Rohit sir. So tomorrow, the third day of our faculty development program, we have the subject time of supply, value of taxable supply, and place of supply by CA Sergio Vijay. CA Sergio Vijay is from Kochi. He will be the faculty for tomorrow's session, which will start by 3 p.m. Sajiman sir, you want to add something? Sir is here now.
No, sir. Okay, sir. Okay, fine. Fine.
Okay. So thank you, everyone. Thank you very much. Thank you, all the participants. We will.
Jose, I think, Jose, we will be sharing that link, video link later on. I think the recorded video link also with the participants, and probably it will be put in the WhatsApp group